The world's best emergency fund. Boy, have I got a topic for you guys today. That's some clickbait, huh? Yeah, so this is a topic I've been thinking about deeply lately. As my journey, my financial journey has progressed over the last 5-10 years, as I've gotten out of debt, paid off credit cards, paid off student loans, paid off car loans, started investing, pumping money into 401ks, IRAs, 529s, HSAs. Something that's kind of been a little vague to me is how much money I should have in the bank, liquid money. What do I feel comfortable with sleeping at night? What makes me really feel at peace and gives me opportunities in the future should things arise? So if you Google this topic, everyone says like 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Just kind of a general, it's like a rule of thumb or like law. Dave Ramsey, financial institutions like Vanguard and Fidelity, there's a CNBC article. They all say 3 to 6 months of living expenses. The only difference I could find was, the only outlier I could find was Susie Orman says 8 months of living expenses. So as I started to think about this, I thought, well, what does living expenses mean? And aren't there differences depending on what your situation is? Like if you have kids or houses and cars and debt. So I started thinking from an anti-fragile perspective, which is what this channel is all about, which really applies to everyone, which is the way everyone should think about things from an anti-fragile perspective. What is the best emergency fund, emergency portfolio, if you will, to have? So for the next few minutes, let's take a deep dive into the world's best emergency fund. Okay, the first thing I want to take a look at is this living expenses number, which I said is a little vague, and all this blanket number is just 3 to 6 months. So I want to look at two examples. Let's first think about a single parent, divorced parent, mom or dad, doesn't matter, who has 3 kids and 2 cars. Maybe one of the children is older and is driving. The second scenario, let's take a look at a married couple who have no kids, dual income, no kids, or the dinks, as we say here. Dual income, no kids, and they live in an apartment they're renting. Okay, so those are the two examples, the two scenarios. So let's start with number one. Single parent, 3 kids, 2 cars, owns a house. This single parent is debt-free. He or she's done a good job, really taking care of their money, and so their expenses are low. House is paid off, no debt. Let's say the living expenses are $36,000 a year. That keeps the lights on, keeps the electricity, water going. Any minimum payments, get groceries, right? Minimum groceries. So $36,000 a year. Living expenses. So 3 months of that is $3,000, or one month is $3,000, and let's say times 3, that's $9,000 emergency fund. Okay, so you figure $9,000 in the bank, that's my emergency fund. That's what's recommended. I'm on a little lower end, but still, that's within the 3 to 6 month guidelines. Now let's say this person has a bad week, okay? There is some rain, large rainstorm outside. There's a leak in the roof, and it drips down into the utility room, the basement, right onto the furnace, and ruins the furnace. So now you need a new furnace. That's maybe $5,000. And someone checks out the roof, and they say, hey, actually this roof is really pretty old. We need to replace the roof too. That's $8,000. So that's a total of $13,000 if you're keeping track here at home. The emergency fund was $9,000. You've blown way past that. And oh, by the way, that dental procedure that your son had last month, the insurance is processed, and turns out that the insurance estimate was wrong at the dentist, and you owe $1,200 out of pocket. This has all happened now in 1 week. This stuff happens, right? I mean, 99% of the time, 95% of the time, things are fine. But when things go wrong, this is what we're protecting for. It's that 1 week out of the year, or 1 week every 2 years, or every 3 years. Things go wrong. So your $9,000 is looking pretty weak. All right, now let's look at the dual income, no kids, the couple who lives in an apartment. No kids, maybe one car. So they are more protected because, let's say someone loses a job, chances are the other person, they can probably live on the other person's salary since they don't have any kids. They they're sharing rent from two incomes, and if something happens to their apartment building, it's the landlord that's going to take care of it. And they have one car, so it should be obvious from these two examples that it's not about necessarily your living expenses, but it is that, but it's also how complex your life is, or how many points of failure do you have? How many places where things could go wrong? The more kids you have, the more cars you have, the more houses you have, or maybe you have more than one house, but how many spouses do you have? I'm assuming it's none or one, but how many, what are your risks? That's what your emergency fund is all about. So while there's no exact formula I can give you, I'd like to be more specific. I'd like to be a little more conservative, and I have some little more specific guidelines for you. So let's start with the spouses. If you have a working spouse, maybe you can be in that 3 to 6 month guideline as a starting point, as a foundation, and I'll add on some more later. If you have no working spouse, you're probably going to be at least 6 months, 6 to 9 months, or even 12 months, depending on your job situation and other factors. If you have a house, add $10,000. For each kid, add $2,000. For each car, add $2,000. So, looking at our first example, our single parent, a minimum of 6 months living expenses, which is not $9,000, it's $18,000. 3 kids, that's $2,000 a piece. That's an extra $6,000. 2 cars, $2,000 a piece. So that's an extra $10,000 total. 18 plus 10 is $28,000 minimum. And that's a minimum. If he or she had mortgage to pay or other debt to pay, you're probably doubling it, so around $50,000 or so. So for most people, as a general rule of thumb, it's going to be in the $20,000 to $25,000 to $50,000 range. And again, there's more things to consider. Another thing to think about is how old you are. What is your job? If you're in your 30s and you're a truck driver or a plumber or electrician or therapist, computer software developer, those skills travel. You're young, employable, energetic. Again, you could push it to a little bit to the lower end of that because you're confident you're not going to be out of work for very long. If you're 56 or 61 or 67 and you have this high-paying job that's kind of or a niche job, or you're just older, right? Let's face it, you're older, you're less employable, you may be out of work longer. That job might not exist. People are not going to hire you. So then you're going to want to be in the 9 to 12 months or even more range. So there's a lot of complexities in your emergency fund. Okay, now let's talk about credit cards. Yes, credit cards are an essential part of the world's best emergency fund. Why credit cards, you ask, if you have all this cash? Well, you pay for things in credit cards a lot. So, again, we're talking about you pay for things with credit cards and debit cards a lot, not cash, right? So you have to have a card. Now we're talking about these 1%, 2% chances of things happening, which is why we have this emergency fund. So let's say you're stranded, need to rent a car for some reason. The car rental doesn't take debit cards. A hotel situation where you need to stay in a hotel, or some kind of limit is reached on your debit card, or for some reason your checking account balance is low and there's a critical purchase you need to make and the money's just not in the debit card, or there was some fraud some fraud activity or perceived fraud activity, and your bank shut off your card and you need to make a purchase at a certain point. So there's many scenarios, unlikely, but they do pop up once in a while, that you'll need to have a credit card for. What about if you're traveling? I've had many experiences in a foreign country where, again, the merchant won't take the debit card, or there's, again, perceived there's a security risk, and your bank will shut off your debit card because you're in a foreign country, even though you told them you're traveling, which has happened to me several times. And yeah, you can get it turned on, but it might take a little while, hours or days, especially if they think there's fraud on the card. It takes a while to get sorted out. Or maybe you just don't feel, you think it's too risky to be using a debit card in a foreign country because you don't trust the networks or the ATMs, or there's some kind of skimmer and they could get access to your cash in your bank account using your debit card, and you get cleaned out. That's a scenario too, that potential scenario that could happen. So many reasons why I think it's essential to have a credit card. Now, I know there's some people who are super anti-debt, anti-credit. The Dave Ramsey types, which I like Dave Ramsey a lot, so I'm definitely not anti-Dave Ramsey. But in this situation, I don't agree with him on the use of credit cards. So, if you think you can't handle a credit card for some reason because you're going to be triggered, or it's going to lead to other things like a gateway drug, and you're going to go on a wild spending spree, there's something psychologically wrong with using credit cards. To that I would say, you have to grow up. Are we dealing with children here, or what? You have to be able to use, if you're at this point, we're talking about pretty sophisticated financial subjects, like making sure the right allocation is in your 401k, what kind of mix to use, saving for retirement. If you've gotten out of debt, you've already gotten out of debt, your spending habits are mature, are adult already. So to say you can't handle a credit card is, I think, is childish. Okay, so you've got you get a boatload of cash in the bank, $25,000 to $50,000 or more. You've got a credit card, or maybe two credit cards as backup. This is a great emergency fund, but it's still not the world's best. Here are a couple more items I think you should have in your emergency portfolio. You should always carry a little bit of cash in your wallet or purse, a couple $100 in cash. You never know when you need to make a purchase, and whatever, the machine is down, won't take credit. So it's good to always carry a little bit of cash as a backup. And on that note, I would also recommend stashing even a little bit more cash in your house, like in the $500 to $1,000, or even more if you're wealthy, to have as a super emergency on hand in your house in case the banks are down, right? I know this is getting a little extreme, but this is an emergency fund. What if there's a terrorist attack? What if there's an electronic issue with a banking system issue? I mean, in the financial crisis of 2008, we were about a day away from ATMs not working and not spitting out cash. I'm not talking about the end of the world here, but there is a situation, there's a potential where you might not be able to get cash out of banks for a day, couple days, weeks. I don't know. Things can happen. Okay, a couple other quick things. Make sure you have the proper insurance. I won't go into detail about these, but got to have the right, at least at a minimum, auto liability insurance, insurance on your home, health insurance, dental insurance. You need to cover the catastrophe scenarios, so you're not drawing out of your nice emergency fund for something that could have been covered by insurance. Have the proper insurance. So I think that's about it. Bunch of cash on hand, cash at home, cash in your wallet, cash in the bank, a couple of credit cards with good limits on them that you're not using, you're not carrying a balance on, and proper insurance. Am I missing anything? Do you disagree? I think I'm missing something, but I tell you, if you have these things I mentioned, you will be sleeping well at night. So could it be improved? Maybe, but let me know in the comments if you have some thought. Otherwise, this concludes our best emergency fund in the world video.
So you stay awake till around that time doing what? Catching up or
Catching up, talking.
even for soccer?
Soccer stadium.
That's cool.
I used to come here all the time. FNB Stadium.
Hey,
Yo, it was